Charlie, now onto the Hermans. These two New York attorneys had a vision of creating a unique dude ranch inspired by their love of traveling the American countryside.
And what a perfect place this is, Christy. Right smack dab in the middle of the Pikes Peak region.
Yeah, but you think they'd make it in this contraption?
No, I'm not sure we could make it in this contraption.
We gotta move on.
We're moving on. The story actually begins with Lee Hermann, who immigrated to the U.S. from Russia with his parents when he was a boy.
He spent his childhood in Brooklyn, New York, and attended college at Syracuse University.
Shortly after, he met Frida, who is more commonly known as Fritzy.
Fritzy received her undergraduate degree from Cornell University with a focus on adolescence. The two wed in 1924.
Together, they attended the St. Lawrence Law School, earning their degrees in 1926. They passed the bar exam that following year.
The couple started their own practice called the Hermann & Hermann Law Firm. It was so unusual in those days for a husband and wife to go into business together that soon their law firm was making news from coast to coast.
Lee and Fritzy Hermann were from New York. They both were attorneys that lived in the city. And when they were young, they came out west.
The couple loved to travel and explored many of the country's national parks. They wanted to share those experiences with Jewish teenagers from the big city who had never been to the great outdoors.
Lee and Fritzy Hermann, what an interesting couple. They also appreciated what the West had to offer, and they saw it as something that would benefit young kids from back east.
The Hermans created travel camps for adolescents where in the summers they would journey across the country to places like the Smoky Mountains, the Grand Canyon, and Zion National Park.
During these adventures, Lee and Fritzy came to Colorado and fell in love with the state.
They opened their first ranch on a 5-acre plot in Westcliff. It was called the Valley View Ranch.
They continued to market the ranch, focusing on the adventures of the West with character-building activities.
According to a marketing brochure, each guest rancher was given certain duties and responsibilities.
They were taught that teamwork and cooperation were the keynotes of a good and organized society.
After 10 years, their success and growth prompted the Hermans to look for a bigger property.
They set their sights on Woodland Park and bought land that included the old Silver Spruce Ski Club just west of Edlow on Highway 24.
In 1937, they named their new venture the Quarter Circle H Ranch for boys and girls ages 13 through 18. In Lee's words from an early Gazette Telegraph article.
By the time the kids have reached teenage years, they have been exposed to camp life in all of its forms. Scout camp, 4-H club, the YMCA. And they think at 15 years old that they have seen it all. But a guest ranch of their own, without regimentation, where the kids would map out their own play, now that would have special appeal.
And special appeal it did have. At the height of their operations, there were over 700 people from 28 states who gathered at the Summer's End celebration.
It highlighted what the ranchers learned from their time in the mountains.
They had competitions, games, and festivities for the visiting parents and guests.
It came to be known as Colorado Day and lasted the whole weekend. It ended with their summer play, performed by the teen ranchers and staff.
A few of the highlights that the campers experienced consisted of horseback riding, roping, wrangling, shooting, archery, sports, and real Western hoedowns.
Every rancher was provided with their own horse for the entire duration of their stay. At one point, the Hermans had over 150 horses between both the ranches, which spanned over 2,000 acres.
Both ranches? I thought the Valley View closed.
It did, but they actually owned 2 ranches in Woodland Park.
2. Now, where'd the other one come from?
I'm glad you asked. Just follow the horseshoes. First was a silver spruce in 1937. What's new to the story was that after another 10 years, they needed to expand again. So in 1947, they bought the El Rancho Tejas, located on the west side of town about 6 miles away.
It seems like they were buying ranches every 10 years.
Exactly. 27, 37, 47. Well, the new ranch was a resort type of operation, formerly run by millionaire oil tycoon W.C. McLaughlin. The Hermans purchased the 370-acre turnkey resort for $60,000.
I see.
Then the Hermans decided to make 2 ranches, one for the boys and one for the girls. They kept the name Quarter Circle H and moved it to the El Rancho Tejas grounds. That became the girls' only ranch.
Go on.
Next, they repurposed the first Woodland Park property, which became the boys' only ranch, calling it the Silver Spur. Couldn't be any clearer.
Really?
Okay, on with the show. Now, in fairness, the girls' ranch got the better deal. The old Tejas was fully equipped with every modern convenience of the day.
The Quarter Circle H was top of its class. It had a large recreation hall, 4-room cabins, and the main house, which was a 3-story log home.
For its design, it was one of the showcases of the Pikes Peak region at that time.
But the boys weren't left behind. The Hermans had the boys bust up once a week to the summit of Pikes Peak so they could witness the sunrise in all its splendor and glory.
Working closely with the community, Mr. Hermann hired the Ralph Hines Bus Company to drive the boys back and forth to the ranch.
To say the Hermans had heart was an understatement. Like some of the other local ranches in the area, they were adored by their community.
Except
Snell.
None
of the locals liked him. Jinx!
Charlie, I got this one.
Of course you do.
As owner of the Paradise Ranch, he was quite the businessman, low-level criminal, and a marketing genius. But we'll get back to that later.
Well, where were we?
And the Hermans were respected by the local people. I know they got a lot of their furniture from the local folks that were made especially for them for the ranches. A number of employees, I mean, they all lived here. So everybody knew the Hermans.
One of the reasons the Hermans were so respected by the locals was that during World War II, Lee invited Camp Carson's wounded soldiers to the ranch.
They traveled to the Quarter Circle H for therapy, relaxation, and recuperation. A local newspaper article of the day stated
that each Sunday, about 25 convalescents pile into GI trucks for the ranch and become dudes.
The soldiers were treated with love and respect, and the Hermans were grateful for their service.
Especially since America and the rest of the free world were in the throes of stopping Hitler's brutal regime against the Jewish people.
The discrimination towards Jews was pretty big, but I think to be able to send kids out to a wholesome place where they could enjoy, be kids and enjoy themselves, I think that probably was the idea. Get away from the city and all the trouble in the city.
Knowing that the Jews still faced persecution in their own country was perhaps one of the driving forces that led them to create the Western experience for young teens.
They were engulfed in a world that they only read about in comic books, newspaper articles, or saw in motion pictures or television.
It was, for some of the ranchers, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And to get there, the Hermans personally traveled in the winter months to market their ranches.
They touted the clean mountain air and healthy living as an escape from the busy, polluted cities.
From New York to Chicago, Los Angeles to Dallas, they set up meet and greets to offer prospective parents an opportunity for their teens to experience the life of a cowboy.
Quarter Circle H Ranch, a 1,700-acre horse ranch at the foot of Pikes Peak, Colorado, announces that its representative, Mrs. Lee Hermann, will be in Chicago at the Palmer House on or about the 21st of January to interview a limited number of ranchers for the summer of 1944.
Fritzie died in 1949 and Lee passed in 1969. Both youth ranches that served 2 generations of ranchers eventually ceased operations.
However, Lee and Fritzie's son, Rick, and his wife Till carried the torch and opened and operated the Pikes Peak Ranch for boys and girls at the Silver Spur location for several years after.
Not much remains of the ranches today, but some of the Quarter Circle H's 4-room cabins survived and are now affordable housing in Woodland Park.
The main house stands as well and is now privately owned.
The Hermanns dedicated their lives serving the younger generation for over 40 years.
They wanted them to experience the great outdoors in true Western fashion, while learning about the fundamentals of life through the eyes of a cowboy.